Hi, David. Long time, I know. Let's fix that. Remember that treehouse we used to hang out in back in the day? Let's meet up there. Have a few drinks or something. Write me back if you're in town. Your good friend, Sean. I could hardly believe the email in front of me. I couldn't believe that Sean Paul had contacted me. We were inseparable back in elementary school to junior high, drifted apart in high school, hadn't spoken since the first year of college. That was nearly 6 years ago. At the risk of sounding like a dick friend, this was certainly out of the blue. But we were really good friends, and I'd always felt guilty about not keeping in touch. With that in mind, I decided to write him back. It wouldn't hurt to see how he was doing, after all. I mean, hell, maybe we'd be able to rekindle that old friendship. Ever since starting full-time employment, my life's gotten kind of dry, so it might be a nice change of pace. Hi, Sean. Crazy hearing from you after all this time. Sure, let's meet up. I'm free this weekend. David. It felt weird signing my name off at the end there, almost like I was emailing my boss or something. I thought back to our times in the treehouse for the next few days. Couldn't help but smile. Those experiences were the innocence of youth personified. I remember reading manga, watching movies on his iPod Touch, and the one time we snuck up a few of my brother's beers, just to see what they would taste like. Not so innocent, I guess. I mean, sure, I was excited. The weekend finally came and I drove out to the local forest. When I moved out, I didn't get very far. It was about a 15-minute drive there from my apartment. We'd agreed to meet at 5 p.m., so I arrived at 4:30. On the way there, I began to wonder. What were the chances our treehouse would still be there? I mean, it was over a decade ago since we'd last gone up. Nevertheless, it wasn't a huge issue. I was sure we'd be able to just sit by the river and drink if it'd been torn down or something. Still, I was curious. Curious to see what it might look like after all these years. I still remembered exactly where it was. There's just some things that you don't forget. By the river, just right out of the clearing. It also wasn't a huge forest. My eyes lit up with nostalgia when I saw it. I suppose it looked exactly like how I remember it. Bit worse for wear, but still intact. I put down my 6-pack of beer at the trunk of the tree. I recalled the makeshift door that we'd built. At the time, we thought it was some marvel of engineering for kids our age. I mean, it was legitimate, functioning door, similar to the one that would lead into an attic. I grinned as I began climbing the wood slabs that we'd hammered into the tree all those years ago. It was our attempt at creating a ladder. I mean, honestly, it worked well enough. I was brimming with excitement as I reached the entrance. A big smile on my face. I reached up, I tried to push the door open, but nothing happened. I mean, my hand just hit a wall of unmoving wood. I looked up, and what I saw confused me to no end. Instead of the actual door we'd made, one just seemed to be crudely drawn on with marker. I stood there for a second wondering what the hell was going on. I mean, was this the wrong treehouse? I looked around the forest again. Not a chance. And like I said, there'd been some things you don't forget. I continued inspecting the space where the door should have been. It wasn't as if somebody taped or glued it shut. It was clean, unbroken wood. I climbed back down and I looked at the treehouse from the ground. Still the same way I remembered it. I mean, a little banged up after all these years, but I mean, it was still unmistakable. Vaguely cube-shaped brown wood, 2 small windows on either side, but no door. Somehow, there was no door. It bothered me so much I began searching the surrounding area. Maybe somehow this was the wrong treehouse, but despite it looking the same and being in the exact same vicinity. I searched for about 25 minutes without finding anything before calling it quits. I walked back to the treehouse and I looked up at it again. It was a puzzling situation, to say the least. I looked at my phone, seeing that it had come 5 p.m. Sean should have been arriving soon. At least At least I'd have somebody to share my confusion with. As I waited for him to come, I wondered why somebody would build a treehouse that you couldn't enter. I mean, how did they carve out the windows in the first place? My eyes began wandering around the forest and eventually back up to the treehouse. And then I froze in place. Somebody was staring at me through the window. They seemed to be standing a few feet back, so it was almost like looking at a shadow. I mean, I couldn't make out any facial features at all, but one thing was for sure. Sure as hell wasn't a kid. Broad shoulders gave it away. I stared at this mystery person for about a minute before they stepped back and out of view. The hair on my arm stood up as I began backing up myself. I didn't feel right. It didn't feel right at all. Soon enough, I was in an all-out sprint. I got back to my car and noticed it was still the only one in the lot. I took my phone and I texted Sean telling him I couldn't make it, for him not to come himself, and I waited around 30 minutes for a response before finally driving off. Kept looking back at the forest the whole time, looking for that person in the treehouse. Got home a few hours ago. Sean wasn't responding yet, which worries me. Maybe he got there even before I did. And even stranger, I remember feeling a vague sense of familiarity when that person looked down at me. Almost like I'd seen them before, which was impossible. Because I literally have no memories of anybody like that. I didn't have a good look at their face. Sean texted me later that night. My hand shook as I opened my phone to read it, and I wasn't sure why. I mean, if I was getting a text from him, that meant he was safe, right? But this is the message he sent me. Did you see him? I must have looked at the message for 20 minutes straight. Did you see him? I mean, I sure as hell did, but I decided to play dumb for the time being, just to see how Sean would react. Did I see who? I certainly didn't see you there. In any case, his next message caught me off guard. You know who I'm talking about. I want you to answer me seriously. I waited for a bit before responding. This was getting interesting, but not in a good way. This is how the rest of our conversation went. Who is he? So you did see him. Okay, sure, I did. So who the hell is he? You still don't remember. That's what I was expecting. Remember what? What the hell is going on? Are you going to believe what I have to say? Depends on what you're going to say. Meet me in the forest parking lot tomorrow at 6. I know that you don't remember, but I'll help you do so. This isn't something we can run away from. The entire conversation had only created more questions than it answered. I mean, what the hell was I not remembering? Why was Sean acting so fucking weird? And more importantly, who the hell was the guy in our treehouse? Sean used to be my best friend, sure, but I wasn't just gonna trust him like this. I decided to call June, a mutual friend of ours, in order to dig up some information. Unlike Sean, I actually kept in contact with her. Here's how that conversation went. David? What's up? June, do you remember Sean from junior high? She went silent for a few minutes. David? What? This better not be some kind of sick joke. Joke? How would it be a joke? Listen, I just want to know if you've talked with him lately, if you know what he's been up to. Did you see him? Yeah, I did. And he was acting really fucking weird. David, you can't go back. Go back where? See, I thought that June would act as a voice of sanity here, but that clearly wasn't going to happen. The only explanation that made sense to me was that this was all just one elaborate prank that they were both in on. Ridiculous, I know, but so are the circumstances. In the middle of our call, I got another text from Sean. Don't tell anybody about this, especially June, okay? Please don't get her involved. I was starting to get fed up with all this mystery bullshit. It was, I was ready to give Sean a piece of my mind. I was going to ask, demand that he tell me exactly what was going on and what he wanted from me, but something caught my eye before I could send the message. Somebody was standing in my backyard. My heart nearly dropped when I saw it. My porch light was on, but they were standing in the farthest corner, so I could hardly make out any explicit details. Seemed to be a tall man with broad shoulders, but that was about all I could discern. I looked down at my phone and dialed 911, but when I looked back up, the person had disappeared. Or so I thought. I turned my head slightly and realized they were actually standing on my porch. I couldn't stop myself from screaming this time. Now fully illuminated, I could see that this person was wearing a black tracksuit and one of those white plastic theater masks with a grinning mouth. It was almost too small for his face, and the sudden sight of him petrified me to the point where I couldn't move a muscle for the longest time. And eventually the man lurched forward and smashed his head into my glass door, cracking his mask in the process. Then he did it again. And again, and after the fourth time it shattered, and that's when I started running. I could hear his heavy footsteps reverberating through my empty house as I barreled out of my front door. I wasn't quite sure where to go, so I just ran into a nearby convenience store before dialing the police, and my hands shook as I told them when it happened. They said they'd send somebody right over. After calming myself down, I decided to call Sean as well. Obviously, I was still kind of pissed at him, but I needed an answer. And I needed them soon. He picked up after the first ring. Sean, can you guess what the fuck just happened to me? What? Some asshole just broke into my house. Was he wearing a mask? What? I mean, yes. How the fuck did you know? Did you call the police? Obviously. No shit. I could hear him sigh over the phone, which pissed me off even more. Look, you wanna stop playing this weird fucking game with me? I haven't seen you in forever, and then you come back into my life with this kind of bullshit? He chuckled. They really did us dirty, didn't they? Say one more line of cryptic nonsense, and I'll report you to the police myself. You can't go back to your house now. They'll be waiting for you. And don't ask me who they are. I'll tell you in person. You remember that diner that we go to during our first year of college? It's been open for a few weeks. Meet me there ASAP. Why there? Because I need a beer and a coffee. Also, I think they figured out where I'm living as well. In the meantime, don't trust the cops. He hung up afterward. I stood there for the longest time trying not to let the disbelief wash over me. About a minute later, I got another call. This time it was the police. Sir, we've taken care of him. For now, we need you to come back to your house and answer some questions. Come back. I told them I'd be on my way. Which was really the only response I could give them. I thought about Sean's warning. If I trusted him, and he really had gone psycho over the years, then I was in big trouble. But at the same time, there was something in the police officer's tone I didn't quite like. Sean sounded more genuine. Suppose he always had been. After a few minutes of consideration, I decided to go to the diner. At least it was a public place. And he wouldn't kill me there, right? I left the store and began to make my way over. I'd been standing in the chip aisle for a while, and the cashier looked about ready to call the cops himself, so I left my car back at my house. I was forced to take public transit, which I really didn't want to do. Now I have the virus to worry about on top of everything else. Bus was empty when I got on, so I decided to close my eyes for a minute. It'd been a long day, and I thought I deserved some rest. Then I opened them back up. A few stops later, 4 more people had gotten on. They were all wearing those theater masks, all of which had varying expressions. They were all staring right at me. No, I don't know what you would have done in a scenario like this, but I kind of just froze. I'm not sure how long it lasted. It could have been a minute, maybe 10. At one point, the bus stopped moving, and I could see the driver putting on his own mask. Not an ideal situation, to say the least. After working up some courage, I decided to make a break for it. I bolted up and I dashed down the aisle, not sure what I was expecting there. I mean, that nobody was going to try to stop me? One of the masked individuals that had gotten on was a large, burly guy. He grabbed me by the shoulder. He pulled me back before I could escape the bus. His fingers dug into my flesh as he centered me towards him. "Are you going to come back?" he asked, in a disturbing, monotonous tone. I didn't answer. Instead, I shrugged away from his grip and I ran off. I mean, he definitely let it happen. If he'd actually been trying to keep me in place, there's no way I would have budged. Thankfully, nobody followed me off. Instead, they just sat there watching me as the bus drove away. Things had gone from annoying to downright horrifying. I didn't get it. And what the hell did they want from me? Clearly wasn't money. They would have just held me up there. My mind kept going back to the idea that this was all just a prank. And as absurd as that was, it made the most sense. I mean, if this was the case, then I was beyond pissed at Sean. This was not something that I needed right now. I decided to walk to the diner. Thankfully, I wasn't accosted by any more people in masks on the way. I expected to enter the place and find a full camera crew waiting for me, and I was ready to chew them all out, but that just wasn't the case. Instead, I found Sean sitting at a table all alone. Oh, I thought. I guess the grand reveal will come later. I stormed over to his table, and I sat down, nearly fuming. What the hell's going on, man? What the fuck is this? He looked at me. He smiled. Face I hadn't seen in some time. I don't know if it was just for me, but looked as if he'd aged about 20 years. "Nice to see you too, David. It's been a while." You know, a normal friend would just stop by for drinks or something, but I guess I shouldn't have expected that from you, you fucking psycho. I stopped myself from saying anything more. "Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that." Sean chuckled. "Come on, David. We never do this soppy bullshit. If I were you, I would have thought I jumped off the deep end as well." Okay, before I go any further, I need to tell you about the last time I actually saw Sean. It wasn't exactly our first interaction. We were sitting in the same diner. I stormed out on him after I called him crazy and other related synonyms. But I had a reason to do so. So he'd been weird ever since high school had begun. Started talking to me less and less, and it peaked during the last few weeks of grade 11. We never even exchanged a word. Then he spent the entire 12th grade being homeschooled. I had no idea what the hell was going on with him. Whenever I got over to his house, his parents would just smile at me, say he was busy. All the damn time. Be busy with what? I always thought they looked nervous. They said it as well. There was also a rumor floating around. Something about the cops finding him in the woods. I'm a bit fuzzy on the details. It's not like him or his parents would ever talk about it. In the summer before college started, they just moved away entirely. I don't know where to. Thought that was going to be the last time I ever saw him. Clearly, I was wrong. Out of the blue one day, he called me over to dinner. I just finished my first semester of college on a high note, so I was feeling pretty good. It was made even better by the fact that my old friend had finally reached out to me. I was excited. Excited to know what was going on with my best friend all these years. I wanted to know that things would be all right. And that everything would revert back to being normal with him, just like the old days. I wanted an explanation. But I didn't like the one that I got. It was like the plot of some bad horror movie. I don't remember what he even said verbatim. There was something about a cult. Something that both him and I had apparently encountered in the woods once. He tried so hard to convince me that it was all true, but, I wasn't having it. Eventually, I just stormed out. I don't recall anything like that ever happening. Even now, it doesn't ring a bell. But I will admit, okay, things are starting to get pretty weird. Do you believe me now? He said. About what? I responded, knowing exactly about what. The cult, he said. The followers of the masked god. I scoffed. Jesus Christ, Sean. This shit again? I understand why you thought I was crazy before, but come on. You're still denying it now after everything you've seen. So you wanted me to see that guy in our treehouse. What is he, an actor? Just like the rest of these masked assholes? Sean sighed. You think I'm the delusional one? I wanted to slam the table when he said that, but I calmed myself down. Okay, I said, sure, it's weird. Okay, all of it is. But there's got to be a better explanation than a goddamn cult. He gave me a look of disbelief. Good grief, Dave. Sounds like you're in fucking denial here. Why do you think I'm here? Where do you think I've been? I paused. That's a good question. One that I somehow hadn't bothered to ask. I don't know, I said. What are you doing here? I came back to save your ass. Like I said, this isn't something we can run away from. Let me explain, alright? Remember the last time we actually went up into that treehouse? I began opening my mouth, but quickly realized that the words weren't there. My mind was blank. I began recalling my childhood, all the time that I'd spent with Sean. It was fairly clear up until the summer before high school. I remembered what happened at the beginning, the camping trip where we both got drunk, our parents kicking our asses, watching The Dark Knight in theaters, meeting my ex-girlfriend Lindsay for the first time. But that was all in July. I couldn't remember anything past that. What the hell had happened in August? Sean grinned at my likely confused expression. It's weird, isn't it? He said. The fact that you can't remember what happened that summer. Is it though? It's not like I remember everything that ever happened to me. That's true. Maybe that summer was so insignificant that nothing worth remembering happened at all. He paused, looking me straight in the eye. But that's not true. Another pause. I wasn't really liking where this conversation was headed. So, what happened? I finally responded. And let me guess, it has something to do with this masked cult. He sighed, almost sounding relieved. Glad we're finally getting on the same page. What do you think? I'm not sure what to think at this point. I could see his eyes wandering over to somewhere behind me. I'll make up your mind later. Looks like they've gotten more widespread since the last time I was here. I turned around, seeing that the waitress was standing absolutely still just a few feet away, holding an empty tray, and of course, she was wearing a mask. The idea of the whole thing being a prank was becoming less and less likely. I should have moved out of this fucking town. Yeah, probably. Looks like I'm not getting my coffee either. He unzipped his jacket, revealing a pistol on his belt. Are you serious right now? I said upon seeing it. Kind of an unexpected sight. Of course I'm serious, he said. This nightmare's been going on for too long. It's time to end it. I could feel myself starting to sweat. Calling it an uncomfortable situation would have been selling it short. Please don't tell me you're planning on shooting that fucking waitress. Waitress? He chuckled. It's not a waitress. Well, whoever she is, please don't do some dumb shit. Relax, he said, zipping his jacket back up. I'm just trying to give you peace of mind. Don't you have a gun as well? Of course I don't. Do I need one? More than you know. Oh my God, I said, burying my face in my hands. There's a lot of heat in here, Sean continued. I turned back around, seeing that at least 5 more of the restaurant patrons now had masks on and were staring over at us. Fuck, this is freaky. Sean stood up and threw a crumpled $20 bill on the table. Let's get out of here. And go where? Take a guess. What? How the hell am I supposed to know? Instead of answering the question, he just walked off. We left the building and headed back onto the streets. I don't know if it's just me, but I could feel a tension rising in the air, almost like an invisible pressure in my body. It was weird. So let's say that this cult hypothetically exists, okay? What's it got to do with us? Why don't I remember any of it? I asked. Sean smiled. You should have asked that question at the beginning. I rolled my eyes. Anyway, it's a bit complicated. And I'm not sure if I remember everything myself. Let me start from where I think the beginning is. According to Sean, this is allegedly what happened. You see, we stopped using the treehouse much during the latter years of junior high. I don't know, I guess we thought that it was lame at that age. Nevertheless, we decided to go there one day, after months of not being there at all. This was in August of 2008, point where I stopped remembering anything. That day we went up there, we found a mask lying in the corner. One of those plastic theater masks. Sean said that he remembered the expression being a disturbing one, so much so that he found it hard to look at. Couldn't fathom why somebody would produce such a thing. And guess what you went and did with that mask? He asked. What? You put it on, and you tried to scare me like a fucking asshole. I could believe it. I mean, I was a bit of a rascal back then, but what he told me next was a bit less believable. As soon as I put it on, I apparently stopped moving. He thought it was part of my act at first, but I never dropped it. I just stood absolutely still, not saying a single word. Even as he tried shaking me out of my sudden trance, I wouldn't budge. Eventually, he tried to get help. But before he went on and climbed down the steps, he looked out the window and saw somebody staring up at the treehouse from the ground. A person wearing a mask standing at the edge of the clearing. Stifling an instinctive scream, he crouched down and began observing. And soon enough, this person was joined by others. And at a point, the masked people had formed an effective perimeter around the tree. This is when he started freaking out. He tried everything to get me disturbed, but I wouldn't budge. And eventually he tried taking the mask off, but he couldn't. For some reason, it was stuck to my face like glue. We didn't have cell phones back then, so he couldn't just call somebody. He glanced back out the window, but couldn't see anybody there. He tilted his head and figured out why. They all moved to the base of the tree. He backed away, he grabbed the knife and baseball bat that he'd hidden in the floorboards, his only line of defense. He could hear the people beginning to climb up. He dashed over, he swung the bat at the head of the person who made it in first. To his horror, his swing didn't seem to yield any effect. He watched as the person's head violently rocked to the side upon impact, and he could hear something crack, but they didn't stop. They just kept pulling themselves up into the treehouse. In a last-ditch effort, he took out his knife and he stabbed them in the shoulder. Instead of blood seeping out of the wound, there was some kind of sand-like substance. That had no effect either. Soon enough, 3 of the masked people had made it up. Sean dropped his weapons and backed himself into a corner. They stood still for a moment before turning their heads towards me, while I was still unmoving. One of them reached out and put a hand on my head, and before chanting out some inhuman dialect, and this is when he supposedly passed out. It sounds like some kind of fucking fever dream, I interrupted him. I'm pretty sure I would have remembered something like that. Let me finish the story. Why? Does it get even more ridiculous? Let me guess. A fucking spaceship lands next, right? He sighed, sounding more frustrated than before. You're in denial. I get it. Looks like I'll have to do something drastic to bring you back to reality. Well, that doesn't sound very promising. He abruptly stopped in the middle of the street. He looked behind us and I followed his gaze. 2 police officers were standing some distance behind us. They had also stopped in their tracks, staring intently at us. Sean took out his pistol and aimed at them. Dude, please don't. He fired a shot before I could finish my sentence, striking one of the police officers straight in the chest. I put my hands up in horror. You've lost your mind, I said, starting to panic. What the hell did you just do? Look at them, he said, nearly shouting. Where's the blood? Curious. I squinted. He was right. The shot had hit the officer close to point blank, but there was no blood stain. Instead, some kind of yellow-brown substance had started leaking from the wound. Almost looked like sand. But that wasn't even the most disturbing part. The cops didn't react at all. In fact, nobody did. The streets weren't packed by any means, but there was a good dozen people in the vicinity. None of them even glanced over at us. God damn it, Sean said, looking around. It's gotten worse than I thought. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to wish you a very well, we're getting close to October. Are you as excited as I am? Also, thank you for watching tonight's video, or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast, if you're listening on Spotify. We're getting further and further into the fall, and closer to those Halloween horror months, which means that if you want to find your nice Halloween horror audiobook to listen to this year, check out audible.com and look for MrCreepyPasta, because I got a whole bunch of books over there. Books like Tales from the Gas Station. Also, I want to give a very big thank you to all of my Patreons over there on Patreon, because you guys have helped me out quite a bit. I'm not even quite a bit. You guys are honestly, you guys pulled me out of an incredibly dark place when I first had to look at moving and all of the demon stuff that YouTube does, and thank you guys very dearly for all the help that you've given me. People like Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Bryon Arce, Bobby Karman, Stephanie Butler, Tristain Pelton, Chase Burnett, Diana Kraus, Raven Mitz, Satanic Aries, Ness69420, AshWood, Payne, Nessie, Blitzscreed, BardoHawk764, Melancholy Corpse, Ferb, Harley, Billy Morrow, Madam Skullbunny, Sashi Sazaku, @Grizzly Olsen Pro, Kayden the Spooky Boy, Zane Nightshade, MyBodySoundsLikeRiceKrispys, AshWood, Lord of the Weebs, Jay, Faye Lockett, Miss Xander, Mr. Unsettling Spaghetti, Suji Campbell, Azarine Fox, Robert White, Fried Chicken 12, James Bruce, Freddy Krueger, Ty Nanny, Michael Scarborough, Infernal One, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Jordan Nels, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiwi the Sloth, Tommy Green, Liam Newman, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Nina Smith, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin. Once again, thank you all so much to everyone who is in this list of names that I mispronounce, and everyone who's in the description, and everyone who supports me at patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. I can't thank you guys enough for listening, for watching, and I wish you all sweet dreams. Good night, everyone.